and everybody on today's call will go ahead and get a copy of the recording to go back and listen to it again. But I'm just going to jump right into it. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for their time today, for jumping on today's call. For those of you that just jumped on, we will be everyone is muted, excuse me. So if you have any questions, please utilize the chat feature, and we will answer those throughout the course of the call. And then at the end of the call, if we have any good questions that a lot of people are asking, we'll make sure that those get addressed for the whole group. So really the purpose of the call today is to learn more about this upcoming, not really it is an IUL training, but it's really a whole life insurance training and what it's all about and how we've helped agents around the country create more activity in their careers when it comes to the life insurance business. You know, really this training has been set up to help an agent get active in the field, you know, right away upon completion of this course that we're going to discuss today. We've all been to an insurance training trip where we've jumped on an airplane or jumped in the car, and we've listened to 4 or 5 speakers throughout the course of 2 days, headed home with a stack full of materials, and we've done nothing with it for 6 months. You know, this is a program that we've built where we see an immediate production, you know, from our agents after they've completed this course. You know, this training was built by John Solomon, who you'll hear from in just a moment, and myself. Now, with the two of us combined with over 40 years of insurance experience, you know, one thing that we truly believe is what the industry was lacking was, you know, proper training, not only on, you know, index products, but life insurance products in general. You know, what we believe that we've created is a course or a system, if you will, that can take an agent from A to Z and help agents, you know, be more productive in the life insurance industry. One of the biggest challenges that we hear when we're talking to agents on a day-to-day basis is how do I get in front of more people? I'm sure a majority of you on this call would agree that that's probably one of your biggest challenges. While we agree with you and we feel that that's probably one of the key hurt points, if you will, we truly believe that we've kind of taken that problem away for the producers that we work with. But I honestly would say that that's probably not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is not getting in front of them, but selling to them. And not only selling to them, but a biggest proponent of that is being able to really understand how these products work, how they were built. You know, you're going to hear John use the terms hidden mechanisms and inner workings. Really, if you can understand how these products work, it makes your ratio of placed cases so much higher. So I really believe the challenge is, you know, getting that app, getting it issued, getting it paid, you know, and that's a whole other story. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, you know, turn it over to John. But before I do that, I just want to give you just a little bit of background on John. Now, John's been in the business for, you know, 25 plus years. Started out with MetLife and their career distribution channel. Sits on Allianz's Life Advisory Board. When it comes to Index Universal Life products and life products in general, John's probably forgot more than a lot of us know. And what we've done is we've really built this course around that. Again, as I talked about in the front end of the call, we understand that our industry is lacking the education of these products. Again, we are confident that the agents that we work with, after you sit and listen to what we have to say, a lot of the agents that we work with are like, the light bulb goes off and we see their sales. I'm not going to use the word skyrocket, but we see a nice projection go up. So with that said, John, I'm going to turn it over to you and kind of take them through kind of what it is that we've built and what we do. So,
thanks, Greg. I want to make a little fun of you, though. I love that he was explaining, hey, we're going to mute all of you. Obviously, when we get a large group of people together, we got to mute a few of them because we don't want to hear the UPS or the dogs bark, which actually could happen. I'm working out of the house today, and I just got a puppy. So if you hear a dog bark, I'm the guilty one because Greg doesn't have a dog. But I love that he went on to say, if you have a question, if it's a good one, we're going to answer it, Greg. That was great. Well, thanks, everybody, for being here. I just want to go off and explain that the whole reason for this call is to tell you what we do and kind of have a job interview, if you will, to see if we can get some of you to come work with us. And, Greg said a little bit about my history. Started with MetLife, went to work for a company called Phoenix, did a lot of planning with Merrill Lynch and PaineWebber, actually, and so I got really into the details of the advanced plans. And then, long story short, hooked up with a company called Ameris at the time, You guys may have remembered Ameris Aviva, Indianapolis Life. Spent a lot of time there, worked with a guy named Doug Andrews, helped build that Missed Fortune deal. Worked with a guy named Patrick Kelly. Patrick Kelly and I started Optima together, whole nother story there. And then started working with guys like Scott Bergman and Greg and just really getting out and training on how to sell life insurance. So let me just jump into it. One of the things that we do a little bit differently from anybody else is focus on training. Like I said, Patrick and I started this company, and our whole focus was to make sure guys had training. Our industry was built by guys that would have a full-time job, a career distribution, if you're working with New York Life, working with Met, Prudential, these types of people. And that type of training that I had is gone. I mean, I literally had to show up every day, 9 to 5, for 13 weeks, for a whole quarter. They even sent me to New York for a week of that to get some detailed training, and again, for no money. Then along came the whole concept of these IMOs, FMOs, BGAs, general agencies, whatever you want to call them, and the business started looking at outsourcing this opportunity. Hey, we can have these other guys pay rent, pay utilities, hire all these guys. They're going to train them. Well, that thing kind of backfired, and all the IMOs took the path of least resistance and just went and stole the guys from the career distribution and actually kind of killed it. So that was the whole problem with that, was just it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually. But what we do is a little different than the other guys. We're not out just grabbing guys from career distributions. We're teaching you and showing you how to sell. Think about the people you're working with currently. When you call an FMO, a BGA, your buddy that gave you a contract, who's at the other end of the line? Who's actually helping you sell? Can they get on the phone with you and talk to your client about what's going on? Can they go on an appointment with you? Can they do more than just run an illustration? I'd be willing to bet that for the majority of you, the person you're talking to doesn't even have an insurance license, right? Very interesting. And then you also talk to some other IMOs that will tell you about some really interesting latest and greatest opportunities, running around, dumping a bunch of money into a policy over 3 years and changing face amounts and doing some pretty interesting things with illustrations. I want to have the opportunity to discuss with you guys these types of situations. If you think you have the latest and greatest, please give us a call. There's so much more to the story, the old Paul Harvey thing. You have to understand that IMOs and BGAs will tell you whatever it is you want to hear. Quick story. Today I was talking to a guy, sold 6 Midland Life contracts, and it was all based upon the guarantees in their term. And the North American Midland contract, the term insurance is not guaranteed to convert. He got off the phone with me, went and called the regional. The guy said, oh, yeah, it is. Don't listen to anybody else. It totally is. He called me back and said, John, they're telling me it is. Hey, here's the contract. Read it. It's just when people tell you something, you have to question it. So everything I'm going to tell you today, question it. Back to the IMO. I mean, let's talk about service. Everyone talks about how great their service is. They're always promising the best service in the world. One of the things I like about Optima is we're bi-coastal. We've got an office in Florida, an office in California, but the most important thing is the people that work for us. For those of you on the call that are familiar with us and been to us, if you send us an email at 8 o'clock at night, chances are better than 90%. You're going to have an answer when you wake up in the morning. We, all of us, tend to have our iPads or laptops going, just checking things, and as things come in, we're on top of it. And I don't want to sit there and promise the ends, of the world in service, because everybody does. I just want to say you're going to have to trust us on this one. I know that we have better service because I pay my girls 3 times the industry average. And boys, that was sexist. I'm sorry. And let's get into the meat of things. What I want to do is just talk about how we do our training and understanding the designs of life insurance contracts and making sure that when you guys are sitting with a client, I don't care if you're going in and you're doing some kind of an equity harvesting or you're talking about taking money out of 401ks or doing IRA rescues, whatever you're doing, whenever you sit with a client, you have to know what it is that they currently have and really understand it. And I think the majority of us truly don't understand how the 4 types of life insurance work. So all these people are going to have one of 5 situations. They're either going to have no insurance, and then that's your job to figure out if they need it or not. The second situation they're going to be in is they could own whole life. I'll say this. Whole life is the only product that will absolutely guarantee you a rate of return and have a cash value, all right? But let's talk about that rate of return, because I hear these stories all the time where people are talking about our 7% dividend rate. You know, the rate of return, 7%. There's a huge difference between the dividend rate and the rate of the return. Most people need to understand, most agents don't understand, what portion of the cash value gets credited with the dividend. And a little story here. I had a guy turn in a really nice IUL, $5,000 a month, and biggest one he'd ever sold. And he was really excited about it. A few days later, the policy was rescinded. I said, what happened? Oh, the whole life guy got in there and started talking about their 7% dividend. Hey, if this guy said he'd give you $5,000 a month, he's probably going to get you on the phone. Let's have the talk. And it was a really short talk, literally less than 15 minutes. We, had the pleasantries, had a few questions, and the final question was to the doctor, hey, is it your interpretation of your whole life opportunity that if you have $100,000 in there, at the end of that year, you're going to have 107? And he said yes. And I knew that was the answer because my agent had told me that's how he was explained to him. So he said, absolutely. And I said, if that's true, I'll buy the policy. Long story short, 3 days later, we had the policy back. People need to understand all the inner workings and hidden mechanisms in these policies. What is direct recognition? What is non-direct recognition? And does it really matter? To me, there's no magic pixie dust you can sprinkle on a dividend scale and say, hey, if you borrow money out, we're still going to pay you, and have it not affect anyone else. It's just, there's two sides to every story, guys. You need to understand that. And I really like this quote from Ralph Nader about whole life. And I'll let you guys all read it because it's in big enough font. But while you're reading that, I'm going to say something else. There's a guy named Elizur Wright, E-L-I-Z-U-R, Wright. Google him, and don't Google it now because we're watching on your screens. We'll see it. Seriously, if you Google him and see what he did for the insurance industry, it'll blow your mind. And this guy was brought to me by a gentleman named Scott Bergman, and it just blew me away. I was so intrigued. I'd done a lot of research on this guy and found out he's kind of the father of life insurance. And he was literally walking down the street one day, and somebody handed him a pamphlet in 1860 regarding life insurance. And he looked at it and did a few calculations and thought, there's just no way anybody could do this and remain solvent. So he became very active. He was an abolitionist, but he also got very heavily involved in life insurance. And he ended up creating the first tables, the calculations for death benefits, and he actually created a calculator. It was a brass cylindrical machine that actually did all the calculations that actuaries would need to create. So between Ralph Nader and this guy, there's some interesting stories out there, but I'm going off on a tangent. Here's my biggest issue with whole life. I have this from 2007, 2010, 2012, and 2013, and I think I just put this one up, yeah. What's interesting to me about this is if you take a look going back 10 years and 20 years, and we can talk about the total cash value, the internal rate of return that was projected, and the actual internal rate of return, even if we go to 20 years. And if you come down here and you look at the illustrated internal rate of returns and what they were supposed to have and what they actually received. And you can't read too much into this. Don't sit there. If you're a big whole life guy, don't start jumping up and down right now and getting all irritated because there's some different stories that have to be told when understanding this entire matrix. The policies here are usually the ones that are designed to have the cash, not necessarily to have the most cash flow. For example, this 5.11, the internal rate of return right here, is not really designed to have a big cash flow coming out, but does have a decent internal rate of return over 20 years. But it's the only one that's over north of 5%. Happens to be this Northwestern Mutual one. But what we do in our schools is talk a lot about whole life and make sure you guys really understand it. So if you run into it, you can actually look at it and explain it to your clients. Variable life. Let's talk a little bit about variable life, because if you run into an annual statement and see variable life, most of the time you just start talking about, hey, you can lose money. Let me show you an index policy where you can't lose money. And there's so much more to variable life because there is a significant upside potential on them. And if they're funded properly and the guy's got the right stomach for it and you've got the proper licensing, there's a heck of an opportunity with these policies. So just keep that in mind. But the problem with them is when the market drops. We all talk about annual reset and really explaining how annual reset works. And you have to understand that versus variable. Now, what happens if the market tanks and you have a variable life policy? If we had $100,000 of cash sitting in a $500,000 policy, we have a $400,000 net amount at risk. Okay, so as we're growing up the cash, we're buying $400,000 in that particular year. Market tanks 50%. All of a sudden, our 100 grand drops to 50 grand, and so many things happen. First of all, our net amount at risk went from 400 to 450, so we had to buy more insurance. And the big thing is that all of those mutual funds, the net asset value of those separate accounts, just dropped by 50%. So we have to sell a lot more to buy that additional insurance plus all the original insurance. And it creates a wicked spiral that's very difficult to build yourself out of. And that's the problem. The big thing, too, about them is that let's just say you have a ton of money, you're using it as a retirement plan, and you're 65, and you pull 100 grand a year out for 10 years. You're 75 years old, there's $1 million loan. Market tanks. There's no overloan protection on these policies. So it's just something you need to be aware of. You need to understand how these policies work. And most of the time you run into them, they're written, 7, 8, 9 years ago when the market was really strong. And I really want you guys to be aware of one thing. Going back to those days when all those policies were really hot, most of them are written on a 1980 CSO table. And a little tangent here is I hope you all understand what happened January 1st, 2009 with the 2001 CSO table and what that means. If you don't, please give us a call. We can go through that. The fourth situation is regular universal life, and I'm going to throw regular UL, IUL, and GUL into this discussion. And there's just too many guys out there that say they're the experts, come to us, we're going to show you how to sell it, but what they really do is push the product that pays them the most. I really don't believe there's that many agencies out there that will offer 4 or 5 different companies, maybe 1 or 2, and no one's going to offer you 100, right? They offer it, but I'll guarantee you that every IMO does 90% of their business with less than 6 carriers. And I just want to explain that in a little more detail. It's not the right time here, but give us a call so we can chat about that. But we want you, again, here's those words, we want you to understand the inner workings and hidden mechanisms involved in these unbundled universal life products, because compared to whole life where everything's bundled up, you can't see anything, the best part about ULs is the fact that you look at an annual statement and you can see what all these fees are. The fees are 100% disclosed. They're all there. There's no black box. And the most important thing is how do you decipher what all those different loads, what those fees, what the cost of insurance are. So there's products out there that are talking about annuitizing the death benefit. Are they annuitizing the COIs and the monthly mortality expense? Very important question. How are they pricing those products down the road? I've seen some very interesting videos running around the internet talking about the fees in these policies in the later years. And I just want to make sure that if you guys are using those types of products, you understand what has to happen for those policies to work out. And what this is talking about here is specifically, how do you compare all the products? If one product has a variable loan with a guarantee of 6 and one doesn't have a cap? What if one company is going to guarantee 5.5? What if someone's going to guarantee 5? What if someone's got a cap of 15? What if someone's got a cap of 10? What does that matter? What if some company is going to pay you a non-guaranteed 1% loan, another company is going to pay you a 0.75 guaranteed loan, both starting in year 11? Other companies are 0.35, 0.25. You got Minnesota Life at 1, North American at 0.75, and then you have LSW and F&G at 0.35 and 0.25. How do you compare all these products with all of those moving parts? And then again, if someone's buying death benefit, it's a much different product than someone that's buying cash value. And in general, the cash value products have higher targets and higher fees so they can afford, the cash value products have higher caps and higher fees to support those higher caps. That was hard to say. Again, when you get the annual statement, how do you guys explain all the fees in the IUL? And that's something we want to make you experts at. And the biggest issue I see out there with the IULs is coming up with a historical rate of return to justify the illustrated rate that we're all putting on the policy. We're all showing these to our clients saying, look, this thing's done 8.3% for the last 25 years. This company has 2,700 data points to prove it's very accurate. But I'm not going to show you 8.5. I'll show you 8 or 7.5 and be conservative. I'm going to show you something lower than what they backcasted. And I say, that's awesome. Let's dial that thing down. Let's overpromise and underperform. But the big thing is this. We're showing a historical rate of return to come up with these illustrated rates. We're backdating 20, 25 years to tell you that we can run this thing at 7.5%. But then we're doing a loan, and we're using today's ridiculously low rates. I see illustrations literally every day where someone's showing an 8% policy, and the loan is at 4.25, because that's where Moody's is today. And so if you're going to go take a look at the historical rate of return to justify the illustrated rate, why are we not taking a historical look at Moody's and comparing it that way? It's apples and zebras. So if you did a look at Moody's, it's a lot closer to 8 than it is to 4 over the last 30 years. And then you have to take a look at the different types of companies out there. What do these companies not have in common? And I'm sure you've all read through this by now. Hopefully you thought about it a little bit. But, you know, Penn, North American, Allianz, and F&G are completely different companies. One's not better than the other, but there's different opportunities to understand the business models, because Penn is a mutual company, North American's a privately held ESOP-type company, Allianz a publicly traded company, and then you got a private equity firm owning F&G. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, it's up to you and what they're trying to do, right? So these are things that most agents don't think about that we want you to think about. The last part, GUL. I want to just go through this real quick, because hopefully everyone on this phone on this call that sold a GUL truly understands that these products are not the old Ronco set it and forget it, right? We can't just assume that someone is going to pay these policies on time out till age 120. You know, one of the biggest issues that I see coming down the line for these products is that, you know, with chronic illness, with hospital stays, bills get skipped. And I want everyone on this call to truly understand the importance of timing with these shadow accounts on the GULs. If you pay early, if you pay late, it absolutely affects the guarantees. There's no such thing as saying, hey, my policy was guaranteed for $10,000 a month. I was going to get my $500,000, and I paid my, $10,000 a year. I paid my $10,000. Yeah, but did you pay the $10,000 1 year before the anniversary date? Did you pay it 31 days after the anniversary date? Because that will absolutely destroy the guaranteed proponent of the portion of these policies. Nationwide did a really interesting study on 8,100 policies. Over 30% of them were off track. Half of the 30% were off track because of early payments. So in other words, you had 30% of 8,100, 2,400 policies. Half of those were messed up because they paid early. 30% skipped a premium or insufficient premiums through 8% off track. There's a lot to learn here about the tiering pricing and what companies did to get around the proposed regulations in AG 38 in order to come up with their own reserves. You know, they were forced to increase their reserves. They thought that the increases were too high. They were trying to figure out ways to be closer to where they wanted to be, and these shadow accounts, multi-tiered pricing for different timing issues is crucial to understand. And that's another thing we're going to cover at the school. Last is term insurance. Everyone on the call has sold term insurance, I'm assuming. And, you know, most of us do look at term as a commodity. And I want to just say it's not. In 2000, we had this thing called XXX, which changed the way companies priced their products. And what they didn't want to do was raise rates. You know, if we had to increase our reserves, they did not want to raise rates, because think about what was happening 14 years ago when we had that. It was really the time, the birth of SelectQuote and all these online retailers selling a truckload of term. They wanted to win the quote engine wars. So they didn't change their premium, but they changed the internal parts of these contracts. And the most important one is the conversion option. And you know, I told the story earlier about the North American, Salmons Group, and Midland products and how they really work. And a lot of these companies have the same issue. If you look at ING, Genworth, Banner, Protective, Lincoln, if you read their contracts and see what their guarantees for conversions are, you'll be a little surprised. And we just want to have that conversation with you, because it's very close at home for me. I have a brother-in-law that last year at Christmas shared with us that he has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, of course, me being the insurance guy, what's the first thing that pops into my mind? You know, where's your insurance? I forgot what you got. Well, it turned out he had AIG. and he bought it in October of 2008. And that product's only convertible for 5 years. After the 5th year, it's convertible to a product they don't even sell. You need to read these policies and read the fine lines. Insurance is not a commodity. We want your clients. I want my brother-in-law to have the opportunity to decide when their policies are going to end, not the insurance companies. Really important. Another thing we do a lot of is if someone's got a 20-year term, we're walking in, oh, you got a 20-year term, you bought it 5 years ago. Let's see if I can find a 15-year term for the same price, maybe with a better conversion option. That'd be better for you. Great idea. But let's take a look at what these 20 and 30 and even 10-year terms do. They flatten out the mortality curve, right? They're going to charge you more early and charge you less later. But the problem is, what do they do early? In those early years when they're charging you $1,000 a month and the 2001 CSO is only $300, they're absorbing and keeping that $700. What if you took that and went to a regular universal life or went to an IUL that didn't have mortality expense fees, and you were able to show them that, hey, instead of paying $1,000, let's pay $1,500. And by the way, when you pay $1,500, we're going to have a significant percentage of that going to the cash accumulation instead of just having the term company swallow up the difference in order to pay, in order to offset the later side of the mortality curve. Because I'll tell you this, in all my years, 26 years, I've never met someone that came to the end of their 10, 15, 20-year term that says, oh, I'm done. I want out. I don't need insurance anymore. You know what? They always want something. So we have to keep that in mind. The next thing I want to talk about with term is all the riders that are on there. I'm hearing all the time how these riders are being sold. Talking about the long-term care, the chronic and critical illness riders on these policies. Again, really important to read because there's a gigantic difference between a true long-term care policy where you actually have 7 activities of daily living. They include ambulation. All of our products don't include ambulation because it's too easy to qualify for, so they just take that out. Long-term care has 2 of 7 ADLs. We have 2 of 6 activities of daily living. And what's interesting is when you read them and you see that, on a long-term care policy, they need assistance bathing. They need assistance toileting. They need assistance with continence. And our products, they're divided into 2 different components here. Some of them fall under the 101G, and we can't call those long-term care. We have to call them something different, like the chronic illness riders. They usually refer to total or permanent situations. Need assistance is thrown out the window. Unable to, permanently unable to. You have to read those definitions. If the riders fall under 7702, it's a true long-term care rider. Those ones are generally not free, and they're not guaranteed in terms of cost. They can go up, but you have to buy them up front. You got to pay extra for them, but those are the good ones. That's all I'll say about that because I've been babbling and told a few too many stories. This is a great slide. Penn State did a great study, and I've been telling people for years that we've all heard the percentage. Somewhere between 3 and 5% of all term policies actually pay a death benefit. Well, they came up with 20,000 studies. Very, very good sample size to come up with some good numbers. 90% of all those are terminated or converted, of the ones they looked at in the study. 45% in the first year. Okay? Number 5, 15 to 20 years of exposure, less than 2% of all term policies are still in force. Here's the big one, number 6, 1% pay a death claim. If your odds are 100 to 1 against it, why would you want to buy term? It's a great study to share. People look that one up on the internet, you'll find it. Then we can talk about IUL. What do you need to know in order to truly understand how these policies work? We obviously have to know what the costs are inside of them. Do you understand what the per 1,000 charges are? When you look at an annual statement, you'll see there's a monthly fee, there's a premium charge, there's a cost of insurance, and there's something called a monthly mortality expense or a per 1,000 charge. Do you know how to explain those, and do you know how to explain what happens if you have to lower the death benefit? Really interesting conversations we can have on how all the inner workings of these products work. Then we get into the crediting methods. Is annual point-to-point better than a 2-year or a 5-year point-to-point? If you want to look at these policies that do offer multiple indices, they have the blended options, there's so many things to look at. We're going to cover all of that. Then we get into loans. And there's 3 things here. You've got participating loans, you've got wash loans, you've got variable loans. And some companies have guaranteed exit strategies, and several more are coming out with it. And you have to understand how these work. If we're going to talk about the rates on these loans, again, like I said earlier, we're comparing historical rates for internal rate of returns to current Moody's rates. You have to understand how these participating and variable loans work, and why I believe that 90% of those ones out there are just bogus. I get illustrations sent to me all the time with 4 and 5% arbitrages showing 14, 15, 16% cash flows. What that means, if you got $1 million at age 65, you're pulling out 130, 140, 150,000 for 30 years, and magically you still have a couple $1 million when you die. We have to understand that the onus is on us, not the insurance companies. Just because they let us illustrate it this way doesn't mean that it's right. How do we illustrate these things properly? You know, again, the proper rates of return. How do you fund policies? How does a 1035 affect a policy? How does a dump-in affect a policy? Does it make sense to dump in $50,000 into a policy and then pay $10,000 a year? Well, the first thing I would say is don't dump in 50 and then pay the extra 10 so you're at 60 the first year, followed by a bunch of 10s, because then you're definitely underfunding. And we show you how to efficiently get money into these policies over time, using the right rates and the right loan rates, and be as conservative as possible, and more importantly, know which product to use. A 25-year-old and a 55-year-old absolutely do not belong at the same company, nor do a 35-year-old and a 45-year-old. You can't work with one company. You have to understand how all these products are priced and how they work. You know, the trick of these illustrations blows me away. When I see that people go into software, and I've seen this trick several times, I could not recreate Allianz. I could not do it. I thought they had a term rider. They were doing something. I read the entire policy. The IMO showed 7% in year 1 and then 8% in year 2 going forward. And it doesn't show up anywhere. So there's tricks that you can do. And trust me, there's guys that do this. And it's absolutely criminal, but hard to catch. Then the big thing we get into on really learning how to illustrate these things is understanding TAMRA, TEFRA, the MEC guidelines, CVAT, and GPT. Going through them, it's boring as hell, but you have to understand. I want to tell you what you used to be able to do and what you can't do, and why it's okay to do it now. And understanding the 2 corridors, and understanding that the guideline premium test absolutely has smaller fees in the long run. And then we get into something talking about the corridors. And to me, the most important thing we get bashed from is the whole life guys. I love this little line. You know what Nelson, Nash, and Pam Yellen won't tell you. Everyone that I talk to about universal life, they always have the same thing to say. Well, option A is no good because when you die, the insurance company keeps the money. They don't understand net amount of risk and how much insurance you actually bought every year. They also say, well, the cost of insurance goes through the roof, and when you're older, it's really expensive, you can't afford it, it's not going to work. True, but also very not true. And this next slide really shows that. Again, they always say the cost of insurance goes through the roof. If you look at this slide, year 1, our cost of insurance is 10 cents. We have $1 million. There's no cash yet. So our net $1 million, no cash, net amount at risk is $1 million. 10 cents per thousand is going to cost us $1,000. Here's Nelson Nash. Your cost of insurance is going through the roof, right? 3 times as much as you get older. So what we say is, well, if you run these insurance policies properly, we're going to have $1 million death benefit. We're now going to have $900,000 of cash. Our net amount at risk is only $100,000. Our cost of insurance has tripled, but the money coming out of the policy is much, much lower. So what they say is right, but as I said before, it's oh so wrong. Talking about pricing these products and how they all work, I mentioned a little earlier about taking a death benefit product and a cash value accumulation product and taking a look at how they work. You know, they're going to have different yields and different pricing spreads on these products, hence different budgets for coming up with their options. So if they're going to the general account and they're making 6%, some UL companies are going to say right off the top, I need to make 1.5 points right off the top before we get into anything else. So we have 4.5% left to either pay in our account on a UL or take to the street and go buy an option, in this case somewhere around a 12% cap. So we're going to go through all the different things that happen in here to make sure you understand that if there's some money here, there might be smaller fees inside the policy. So we're going to go through all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to get into underwriting, how to deal with different types of cases. What we do is really interesting because we have a on-staff actuary. She was an underwriter for AXA. $20 million opportunities for her. She could sign off on $20 million. But what she does is she negotiates cases for us. And this is a really interesting story for me. I've been saying really interesting too much. But I had a policy that I wrote $45,000, and we went to 4 carriers. A decline, 2 standards, and a super preferred. And it was rheumatoid arthritis. And if I didn't have Lee to tell us which company we wanted to work with, because one of these books, the Swiss Re book, was better than the Munich and Gen Re in this particular situation. So it worked much better to go to this other carrier, and they gave super preferred because last year there was a study that came out with rheumatoid arthritis that said it doesn't have nearly the mortality associated with it that we thought. The other carriers wouldn't look at that book, didn't care, still going to decline it. Is Table 2 the same with all carriers? With term insurance, absolutely not. With term insurance, let's not shop ratings. I get a call all the time. Hey, these guys went Table 2, these guys went standard. Can you get this Table 2 to match standard? What's the premium? Don't call me and talk to me about, ratings. Tell me, let's talk about premium. And is Table 2 the same with all carriers? Absolutely not. There's a lot of carriers that don't have a Table 2. There's other tables that have carriers that have table shaving programs. That's the kind of stuff that we want to help you with. I've gone over my time a little bit here. So, Greg, why don't I turn it back over to you for the summary? Well, I'll just say the summary. The bottom line is that we want to make sure you guys understand how all these products work. We give you real training that's non-existent out there. I'm going to make sure you really understand all you need to know about equity index universal life and selling techniques. And I didn't even mention our friend Rocky DeFrancesco. When you work with us, Rocky's been doing a lot with us, and we have some really interesting opportunities to get access to all of his stuff if that's something you're interested in. Greg, I'll turn it over to you for this part.
Yeah, thanks, John. As we mentioned, there is a little bit of a typo on the top there. It just says next training's in October, which is actually this month. We are doing one, but the next one is actually November 3rd and 4th, as you can see there in Dallas. This will be our last event of the year. The cost is, we've knocked this one down. It's $200 for the 2-day course. One of the things that we've done is agents that come on board and attend the actual training, once you hit 50,000 a target with us, we'll reimburse that $200. We've been doing these throughout the course of the year. We've had quite a few agents that have come through and have received that tuition reimbursement. So as John alluded to, excuse me, getting over a little cold here, but as John alluded to, what we really feel the power behind this, again, is when you are sitting down with that prospect or your client, whether you walk into the home or the business, before you go in and try to sell a product, we want to teach you guys to be able to, pick up what's currently in that home or business and really analyze and review. And that's what John and myself and the rest of our team specialize in, is making sure that you guys understand how these products work. That way, when you go in, you have the confidence to explain these products to that client. So then when the next agent comes through the door, tries to sell underneath you, that client of yours knows that, hey, this agent I'm working with knows these products inside and out. They've done a great job of explaining how these things work to me. John said something about, that first year when you come back in and look at that annual statement and there's all those zeros, you don't know how many times in my career I've gotten that phone call from the agent saying, Greg, you got to help me out with this. I don't know how to explain this to a client, Well, it all depends, again, when that company, when do they credit? Do they do daily sweeps? Do they just credit on the 15th of the month, the 30th? Those are just those little things that a lot of IMOs are not teaching their agents that are getting out there and they're losing sales because they're like, wait a second, I don't want this product anymore. You told me I was going to get X and I'm getting zeros here. So it's one of those things.
No company is going to show returns, Greg. And at the end of that first
Correct.
year, no one's going to have it on that first statement.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, everyone's going to, John, if you want to go to the next slide here, you pop up your contact info, I believe, should be on the next slide. There's John's direct email. My email address is the exact same, except for instead of John, it's just Greg, G-R-E-G. You guys will receive a follow-up phone call from either John, myself, or one of our other staff members. Also,
but Greg, let's mention next Monday. For any of you that can we're doing a school next week with Rocky DeFrancesco in Orange County on Monday and Tuesday, literally across the street from John Wayne Airport. So if you're across the country, it's going to be an expensive flight at this point. But if anyone's interested, they can get to Orange County on Monday and Tuesday. The school, we didn't advertise it because it's too close, but I just want to throw it out there that, hey, if any of you can make Orange County on Monday and Tuesday, good opportunity. Send me an email, or you can call me at 415-515-5005. John Solomon, 415-515-5005.
And I just sent that number to on the chat feature to everybody. I did have one question. Just asked if we were going to be in Chicago. We were actually in Chicago in July. So like I said, Dallas is the next one for 2014. And as of now, we don't have anything slated for 2015. So if you are serious about this and looking for something, you know, to wrap up this year and definitely catapult you into 2015, it's definitely worth taking a look at. And that's all I have. There was no other questions. John, anything you want to add before we close up?
No, that's good. Thank you for your time, everybody. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks.